Welcome to Pod Have Mercy.
So this is Pod Have Mercy, and usually the senior pastor of the church is here. He's in Spain right now with a group of pilgrims from our church, kind of doing something. So because of that, B team gets to take over, and today we're like, hey, I wonder if Shannon's around. So that's the deep planning that B team has, which is like 7 hours beforehand, reaching out to my friend in London, wondering if she's going to be awake,
as it should be.
So that's it.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Tuesday night. So you got me in.
Yeah. So we'll talk about things around kind of spirituality and the church and modernity, kind of trends and things that are happening. We talked a lot when the United Methodist was kind of going through their thing, just about some of that. We try to have conversations that you can't have in a sanctuary, and so it really, there's not a lot of parameters around what we can and can't talk about. I just thought having you on, Shannon, would be just a boon as the first time, not the last, because of the way you think, what you're doing, who you are. Jeff, I got to know Shannon as what I feel like I've known you since, I feel like we went to junior high together, although our history does not reflect that. But I mean, I got to know her as a part of a cohort that the Texas Methodist Foundation and Wesleyan Impact put together around innovators. And so I had known about Shannon for a long time, but never met her. And then when we met, it just felt like meeting a sibling. And so we've been able to, I guess, over the last 3 or 4 years, kind of see each other a couple times a year, and then just stay in touch and all those things. So, yeah. So, first of all, tell us why the heck a Texas girl is in a London flat. So, tell us a bit about your history, and then we'll get into I know you have to do this all the time, but a little bit of the dog and pony show before we jump in.
It's so funny because this past weekend, you'll probably want to edit this a lot, but this past weekend, I was part of a 30-year-old's birthday party, and I'm in my 50s now, but she's the daughter of my youth minister, and she is also living in London now, and so some neighbors who lent me their flat, because I had 12 people descend from across the UK to be part of Alex's birthday. 40 people did a scavenger hunt in London. I did not know my British history well enough. That's what I learned this week. I don't know what bones
are. A lot of
buried.
Stuff happened.
A lot of things.
The gates from the Roman days. I don't know those things. Anyway, so one of my neighbors lent me their flat, and they're like, so how do you know Alex? And I was like, oh, well, her father was my youth minister and taught me Bonhoeffer at 16. And actually, we on this walk this weekend, we passed a blue plaque, which is these where famous people live. Yeah. And Bonhoeffer lived in London for a period in the East End, actually,
really?
Before World War II. Yeah. Which I didn't know that.
I didn't either.
But when it's to be willing to lose your life to follow Christ and to take seriously the call of the gospel to transform the world, that put a different imagination in my life. And that took me from Kerrville, Texas to London 21 years ago.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy.
I did. I had a career in business where I worked with startup fashion designers and did the American dream, and I found it lacking. And I started looking at my friends in my 20s and thought we all have everything we're supposed to have, careers and money, and we're living the life, and no one had meaning and purpose. And so I started going back to, is there anything to this gospel story that I was taught in high school and that I'd kind of deconstructed in university? And if I really took it seriously, would it change my life? And so I ended up planting a church in Texas and then working with young adults. And I found I was asking questions that weren't very popular in the early 2000s about what are the new economic models for mission? What is church when you're not, when it's not a place you go to, when it's not a noun and it's a verb? And who are the leaders of the future? Who are the leaders that culture recognizes as leaders that are more walking in the way of Jesus than standing on a platform? And I just found I couldn't ask those questions without ridicule. As a woman in Texas in 2003, I jacked it all in and moved to London.
Like, what was in London? Was it a dude? Was it like?
I wish. I'm still looking for the dude. So, hookups, welcome. So
We'll put your Instagram up so people slide in the DMs. Okay.
um, yeah. So, okay. Well, the truth. So, 2003. I had ended up like meeting all these young leaders and trying to connect them to one another. And I'm a connector. I love
Yes,
to
you
connect
are.
people. And while I was doing this and kind of building this network of young leaders, I was raising money. And and then I raised $1.5 million, and I did this event in the middle of South by Southwest. We took over this house in March of 2003. We did this event called Wabi Sabi, which is all about the old and the new working together to make something beautiful that's ever changing. I thought it was a beautiful example. It kind of it was great for the
Yeah.
it's what the church should be.
Yeah.
Anyway, um, and I invited all these young leaders to come, and then we brought in some like people to do training, theologians and social workers and community organizers, and it was crazy because the Austin American Statesman wrote us up as like the best thing to see off program at South by. And I was working for the Baptist Convention at the time
Dear Lord.
to like this little experiment. And they thought I'd lost my mind. But in the midst
The
of being
Baptists
told,
thought you'd lost your mind.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Who are these people you've gathered? What
Yeah.
are you doing? $7,000 to gather these people. I'm like, $7,000 to put on an
Cheap.
event that the paper writes up about? I mean,
Yeah. Come on.
come on.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, I went into this room where we were doing a training, and all these people that I really loved, and 8 people from the UK had turned up because Andrew Jones, who had a blog at the time, because this is, 20 some odd years ago,
Oh, yeah.
tall, skinny Kiwi, had blogged about it. So these 8 people from Sheffield, England turned up and said, look, can we be part of what you're doing? How can we serve you? We want to just be in on the conversation. So then they made tea and scones for 2,000 people in Central Austin during South by.
That's cool.
And I thought, we don't have a clue about what it means to do mission in a postmodern, pluralistic, post-Christian context. And I started going, man, what's up in Europe? Like, what's happening in Europe? And is there anything we could learn from a culture that might be further ahead? I didn't ever think I'd move here, but 2003, I did a research trip. I went to house parties in Switzerland and walked the Camino de Santiago and hung out at festivals. And I got very excited that the future of the church, this is the most exciting time to be a Christian. Like, everything's up for grabs. The future's more exciting than the past. This is a time to take risks.
Yes.
The leader of the future is not going to look the same as the leader of the past. Like, this is great. And we had $1 million in Texas we could experiment with. In 2003, that was a ton of money. It's a ton of money.
It's still a ton of money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But in 2003, that's like crazy money.
yeah, crazy money. And when you're 30, right?
Oh my
Or
gosh.
31,
Yeah.
you think, wow. Yeah, so I came back thinking, this is the jam. We could just
Let's go.
experiment. And I think that's what this season calls for, is a lot of experimentation, which I think scares people. But yeah, it just became untenable. And in November of that year, of 2003, I basically was fired from this network that I was building and had raised all this money for. And they kept the money, but they gave me a raise and made me a consultant. And the day that that happened,
They
it was
totally
so weird.
Dilberted you. They Dilberted
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Let's make you totally ineffectual and give you more money and pat you on the head. That's such an
Yeah,
American
yeah.
thing to do.
It
Wow.
is. I mean, and I never really, I mean, I've always been an entrepreneur, so it
Uh-huh.
felt very strange to me. But the day that happened, I literally left this meeting and I burst into tears as my phone rang. And, it was back when cell phones, you had little flip phones and you couldn't really know who was calling. Anyway, I answered the phone. And it was this woman from the UK who I'd met at Greenbelt, which is a
Yeah.
festival. And she said, I've been trying to track you down. My husband and I feel like the Lord wants us to give you a holiday. And if you'll come to England for a month, we'll pay all your expenses. And they lived in West Sussex, which is about 2 hours south of London. And so I was like, sure. So I said to the convention, I'll take your job, but I'm going to start in January. I came for a month. I never thought I'd live here. I didn't really know where I was coming. I hadn't spent any time in London, just so
Yeah.
you know. I'd gone to Sheffield when I was traveling, and I'd gone to Greenbelt. And I got on the plane in 2003, and I said to the Lord, I don't want to do ministry ever again. I feel really done. Just let me go back into business. And then I took a deep breath and I said, but I'll go wherever you want me to go. Just don't let me come back to America bitter.
Just not to the Baptists.
I like the Baptist. I grew up
Yeah,
to
yeah,
be
you
a
are
Culture
one.
Baptist.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what I am. I'm a mutt because, I play with everybody, and informed by so many traditions. But yeah, so it was a
Wow.
healing month. Never thought I would move here. Never came to London that whole month that I was here. Got on a plane, came back, had no idea what I was going to do. And literally 6 weeks later, I got a call from Andrew Jones, who had this blog, who said, every time I pray for you, I feel like you need to be in London. And I laughed out loud and was like, that's never going to happen. But over the course of a month, I just had so many people call me with they'd had dreams or visions or people that didn't know each other. And I thought, this is crazy.
Mm.
I've just got to do it. So I quit my job. I cashed in my 401k, and I moved to London. And I thought, I don't know if I'm coming for 4 months or 4 years. But the short answer, so you could just scrub all of that I just said, is I say, my first career was in business, and my second career was in faith-based nonprofit work and church planting. And it was like two parallel tracks
Yes.
that didn't talk to each other. And business didn't really think about impact. They only thought about the bottom line. But they actually knew how to like grow markets, and develop, and just build a following. And then the nonprofit world was actually struggling to like grow following now. And they don't think about impact or sustainability. They talk about impact, but they don't actually measure it.
Yeah.
And so what if these two streams actually talk to each other? And so I felt like I needed a new playground to play in and to see how do these two, I think what the nonprofit world really can give is this sense of meaning and purpose
Yeah.
in a
Mm.
way business can't.
Yes.
Um, and so that's why. So it's for me, it's just been a playground of
Hmm.
like
Cool.
try some stuff, experiment, build things, and see what works in a culture that's further ahead than
Yeah.
America in terms of post-Christendom.
Beautiful. Talk about a bit of the maybe one of your first experiments that you had that kind of combined those two when you were in London.
Yeah, I mean, well, the very first project I did was an art project. And I was asking the question, like, what's the role of art in a post-Christian secular
Hmm.
society? When public art's commissioned, when more people visit the Tate Modern than visit St. Paul's Cathedral, when the Tate Modern is free and St. Paul's is you pay to get in. So like what's the role of art? And I ended up meeting an artist who, has had since a very big career, but was an emerging artist at the time. And he was asking questions about faith and why can artists, Damien Hirst can do something about Jesus and it's cool and it's trendy, but if a Christian does something, it's
Yeah.
cheesy. But like, what's the real thing we need to actually explore about faith and how do you create a dialogue and not a debate? And so I started working with Rob, and really I just say I just was his friend. I just walked alongside of him while he went into churches and redrew the Jesus narrative. And we created this exhibition called Doxology. Um, and yeah, funny enough, we did a show in Houston and Montrose at Chris C's church
Oh
down
yeah.
at
Yeah. I
Ecclesia.
can see it.
And it was interesting because like the Manils came right from the Manil Gallery because Rob is like a proper artist, but we did this thing in the church. Yeah, and yeah, that was fascinating. So that was the first thing, and I learned a lot, funny enough. I don't know. I'm just talking. It's 9 o'clock my time, so you can just cut as much as you. Um,
I love it.
the, a week before we went to Houston, actually, so Rob's interestingly, okay, this the whole backstory. The very first project I did was Doxology with Rob. Now, I met Rob because he'd gotten roped in to design a playground during Soul in the City. And, and then he chased me to be his friend, not the other way around.
Yeah.
I have a lot of people that say they're artists, but he kept calling and saying, "No, I want you to come see my studio." Well, his studio was behind the Tate Modern.
Wow.
And I walk into his studio. He's been written up in Elle Decor by one of the top designers in Britain. And he's got a painting heading to some princess in Dubai. And I was like, oh,
Oh,
holy
you are
crap.
an artist.
Real artist. And I had been like for months, I didn't know anyone. I'm an extrovert and a networker, and I like had not made friends here. And I was like, what am I doing? I'm 4 months into being in the UK. Anyway, he takes me to the Tate Modern, to the members lounge. He opens his journal and he says to me, "You and I, we're going to do a project together." Like,
Wow.
I know nothing about the art world. And he said, "Yeah, we're going to do a project and I'm going to redraw the Jesus narrative. And then we're going to get people to be in dialogue with what I'm doing. And we're going to have a conversation and it's going to be great." And so he did. He went, he had a brief, like he went in these churches from when the gospel was told by visual image instead
Yes.
of oratory. And he'd redraw the Jesus narrative using a more Buddhist practice. And then he'd walk away and pray and meditate and ask the Spirit to reveal if there was any truth in it. And then that part would become gold leaf. And it was amazing. And that was, the year the Da Vinci Code came out.
Ah.
And he went to the church, the Da Vinci Code church. In fact, it's where the Lord's Supper is done. And in the original, it is so clear that one of the figures is a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked the vicar about it, and the vicar starts yelling at him. So this is a person that is not a believer, that is like seeking, is there truth in this story? And the vicar starts yelling at him that this would have been a boys' night out. There were no women, goes red in the face. And Rob walks away and he's in his studio, like just asking for revelation. And in the painting, the table is gold and the light fixture becomes gold. Like there's a light,
Yeah.
or I don't know if it's really a light fixture, or some kind of candle. And he said, "Isn't the whole thing that Jesus always said everyone was welcome at the table?
Mm-hmm.
Not just the boys, not just the men. That is the light and the hope that's in the world."
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was the first project, and I learned so much. The week before we were going to come to Houston, I showed up at Rob's studio, and he is the most chillaxed person I know, right? Like,
Hmm.
non-anxious. Anyway, he was pacing. I was like, "What in the world?" And he said, "Look, I've just decided you're gonna make me like bow or like kneel and say a prayer before you'll let me like open this exhibition." Like, at this point, I'm like, "Let's see, it's all your own money, it's your
Yeah,
own
yeah,
art."
right, right.
I'm like, I was like, I don't know what you think I'm gonna do, but we've been on this journey for a long time. And I just took a breath and I said, look, I don't know. I don't know why you think that, but I can tell you this. I've learned more about following Jesus from you than I think you've probably learned from me in this process.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
That's beautiful.
when he got up to open the exhibition and he stood in front of this triptych of like crucified Jesus, and then it was like Mary and Peter on the other side. And he stood up and he said, "I'm not a Christian." And he said, "But I hate this painting." He said, "I feel like it is just a rock that I am bashing into. But everyone in this room, we have to deal with what it means to be a student of Jesus. And that's all
Wow.
I want to do for the rest of my life."
Wow.
And I'm like, if that's not,
Yeah. Come on.
then I don't know what is.
Yeah.
So
Right. That's
anyway, and that put me into the art world, and I learned the market of the art world, and there's a different economy to it, and who gets to speak. It's got
yeah.
its problems, but that was the very first project I did, and it's kind of been, it all comes down to relationships, opportunity, creativity,
But
and
it's
saying yes.
also like the way I see you move and the projects that you both involve yourself in, and then I want you to talk a bit about then the products that you've developed for the church as well. But it seems as if like there's program like the particularly the American church is stuck in a type of model where you come and you show up and it's very programmatically heavy, right? Um, we create strategies to really just do programs, right?
Yeah.
But what I see you doing is not a program, but there's a different algorithm, a different type of thing that you see in culture, that you see in relationships, and something emerges that's like singularly different. It's uniquely different. So it's not as if then you've created a program called doxology.
No.
It's that these relationships emerge and they're doing something different in the world, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you have learned early on. One of the things I want to talk to you about is this: is that you can, in a sense, I feel like sometimes when I'm with you, I can see into the future. Oh, this is what the church ought to be doing, right? You bring design elements in rather than how do we have the best program? What are we designing for? And that design actually makes you ask a total different set of questions,
Yeah.
right? And so, yeah, if you can.
Yeah, there's so much. So I'm just trying to decide which riff to take off that, because I could go straight for design. Um, I think you're right there. I think that what we've done is we've created, like, the church is a noun. We're like locked into consumer culture, so we give people something to come to consume,
Yes.
and then a program like is the only thing we know how to do that fits in like the time and the rhythm of life to the thing that we've created for people to come to. So we actually have these constraints of like what's possible. Um, and our economic model is totally tied to it. And so I don't,
Yes.
as long as our economic model is tied to it, we won't redesign something different. I just honestly believe that. And we're not asking questions. I don't think we ask, I think we tell people what they need. All of our programs are telling.
Yes.
They don't show, they don't give people experience. They tell. And Henry Nouwen's quote that I love is answers without questions do damage to the soul. And sometimes I think like our discipleship is
Yeah.
so thin.
Oh, yeah.
Like, wherever you are on the political spectrum right now today, whatever you believe about consumerism, like we're not transforming the world for
No,
good. Like our discipleship is so thin,
no, no.
you know. Um, I was telling these young people on this at this birthday party this weekend, by young, I mean, these 20s and 30 somethings who Dietrich Bonhoeffer was. And I was like, he tried to kill Hitler. And they were like, why did he do that? And I was like, well, he was a theologian and it was his faith and they were like, oh, well, I would want to know someone who follows Jesus to that degree.
Right.
And so, but we're not asking questions. We're not helping people
No,
ask questions
no,
either.
no. And
And to
that's,
lean into history. And I think that is what good design does, is it starts with questions, good questions, deep questions. And it's not questions that can be asked quickly.
how do you formulate a good question?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question.
Hey, there you I just did it,
He
folks.
just won.
Yes.
Just won.
Checkmate, Shannon.
Yeah. Um,
No, but you're right. I mean, I've been around you long enough to know that you sit. There's a wisdom you have, but also, like the church has got to be better at asking questions, because I think you're right. The modern church is answering questions no one is asking.
that's right.
Right. And so the culture has moved on, and we have our little island called the church, and we're so excited when 3 new people come, and it's crazy that we've lost our sense of mission and self, and, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think to get to a good question, there has to be some space. And so I think this is problematic in America, particularly. I think it's hard in the West, but I think it's particularly hard in America. We run on hyperspeed. And we go, go, go. It's more and more and more. We don't take time. And I actually do think getting to a good question takes time. And it takes space. And it takes paying attention. So I'll go to like a question I started asking a few years ago, and I'm just still sitting with it. I don't have any answers, but I've been asking, like, what's the real future economic of rural land? Like, farms and ranches um, and if we could figure that out, would it reshape how community forms? That the missional impulse that drove us the last 20 years towards the city and towards the urban, in the midst of climate catastrophe and with young people not believing they're going to do better than their parents, like, is there something in the rural, like, is there like a new agrarian future that would transform us, that would like reshape how community forms? And that's just it's a big question with, it's multi-sector. It's a multi-sector question. It's, got economy to it. It's got land use. It's got, it's got lots of
Yeah.
facets. In the same way that the question about art, what's the role of art? Well, it took me paying attention to like what was happening between the Tate Modern and St. Paul's. Like rural land took me paying attention to young people, or especially in Europe, they really do not think the future's gonna survive.
No.
Like they really care. They really think that the land that is in crisis, in a different way than I do. I mean, I do think we're in global warming. I think that climate is in crisis, but I don't worry about my future, future in the same way that I know a lot of young people do. So I'm just like, what's that mean? And farmers can't pay for milk, and they can't sell their milk for what it costs to make it. Like there are things that are broken in that system. So what's justice look like there? What's regeneration? What's health? What answers could lie in the land for us? That's just a question. But how I came to it was I started reading about creatives that were moving onto the land in upstate New York. And then I was reading about this farmer that, got sick and said the way we farm makes us sick, and I just started seeing things, and like all of a sudden it was like I had 10 or so things, and I was like, there's something deeper here to wrestle with.
All right.
And that was a question that could hold me. And I think that's, yeah, but it, again, it started with my youth minister. Following Jesus isn't about getting people to come to church with you. It's about the transformation of your high school campus. Where is there injustice, and what would justice look like?
Wow. That's great. So tell me a bit about design thinking as it relates then to the church. Does that make sense? Like why are I mean, I know why programs aren't in 10 or 15 years, investment in programs feels like investment in a Betamax. It's like, thank you. That's not going to work, right? But when I watch you design, you're designing for something else, right? You're not designing for the past and for programs, but for almost like this ecology of health, of wellness for the community, for people, and and maybe in the middle of that, does the church still have relevance?
Well, I think I'm still a big believer that the church is the best we've got. Like I actually think if the church wakes up and gets on it, then I think watch out, right? Because
Right.
so I do still think the church has relevance, and I'm a big believer in the church. I think design. I designed a game called Mission Possible, which is all about design thinking for social change. And it's a game that's like a workshop. And it's trying to teach the process of design thinking, how you start with a question, like a wicked problem, and then what part of the problem do you want to solve? And then you get some resources, and how do you bring those resources to bear, and to what end? And I think with all of it, the more I do this work, the more I think the difference between good design and bad design is a focus on impact. Why are you doing it? What impact do you want to have? And are you going to be ruthless about having that impact, or are you going to recognize it when you don't, and like hold your hand up and say, that didn't work? And that's why I think this is a season for experimentation, because a scientist will try a lot of things and fail a lot. Like not every experiment is meant to work.
Yeah.
And that's the mentality we need to learn what doesn't work and keep going.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I don't know if that helps, but
Yeah.
I think the focus on impact though, and what are we designing for?
Yeah.
It's interesting because when you talk about scientists, they don't really assign or have attachments to the things that they're manipulating and experimenting with. But in the church, we have all these attachments to everything that we're trying. And so if it doesn't work, it's like a reflection on...
It's got to work. Just pour more money into it.
Exactly. I'm not going to let this Bible study die.
Right.
But it's like a scientist, they come at it from an angle where it's like it's not almost not reflective on who I am if these two components don't make the thing that I'm trying to create, or the reaction that I'm trying to create.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting.
I think there's an old book in the 90s called Sacred Cows Make Gourmet Burgers.
Yeah.
And I think we have so many sacred cows in the church that we won't like mix it up, right? And we're afraid to let things go. And also we start things though without rigor. How many times do you think somebody goes, oh, I've got an idea, and we'll just go and do it? Now, I think the best thing that has ever happened to me is I hang out with a bunch of British people, and And the first thing they just shoot down ideas
They're just
until,
all about rigor.
That's a hobby.
It's like that country of Eeyores.
they are.
I know. I live there.
Yeah. Whereas I can say something, and often when I'm traveling in the States, I'll come up with ideas and people go, oh, that's a great idea.
Let's go.
Go. And it's like, yeah. But then it's like without some of the challenge
Yeah.
and
Yeah. What is the difference between design thinking and I'm thinking about that for like really particularly for the church. There's a part of me that even wants to kind of go back to our senior pastor John and say, hey, I'd like to start an R&D, of Chapelwood, of this context, not just generally ideas, but specifically. And could we, and so if I were to do that and they were to say, oh, that's great, Russell, go for it. And I were to then say, I want you to teach me about design thinking, right? And then how to design some, what are some of the elements that I would need to, a person like me would need to kind of begin to kind of accumulate or attend to?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I think design thinking is a tool in a tool belt for a research and development lab. So if you want to go after R&D, right? And or if you want to have a lab, like design thinking is one process that can get you there. And I like it because it starts with it really does start with what do you see that needs work? What's broken? What problem are you trying to solve? Right? And you can go really big. Like I really want to work on isolate. Like I think isolation is the biggest thing in our culture today is that people are isolated and that's affecting their mental health and it's affecting their physical health and it's affecting communities and their earning potential, all these things, whatever they are. Well, what part of isolation and who's isolated? And it takes you down asking a series of process questions to get very narrow and then to figure out, well, who are you to work on this problem out of what you have in your context and who do you know? And then you can begin to ideate, right? So design thinking has a process. I always say that the best design, and even in the Mission Possible game, you can get dealt lots of different problems. The best ideas always come when somebody very personally is connected to a problem. The best design comes when you've actually had some experience of the problem you're trying to solve. So, homelessness, mental health, and all of these things end up having like their social. I mean, for me, it's using design thinking for social impact. But user design is another. Who are you designing? Again, who are you designing for? User design is another tool. It's just not one I know as well.
Yeah.
And it hasn't become as it seems more niche in terms of like career. Whereas design thinking feels like it's been democratized a bit.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Okay. I know that we have limited time, so I'm going to ask you a couple questions. What keeps you up at night and what gets you up in the morning?
What keeps me up at night right now is I am actually thinking a lot about community and later life. Like, I'm a community builder. Like I think beyond anything, but I just started thinking, what's community going to look like in 20, 30 years for me? And how are we really changing that? And what life together looks like is in aging. And that honestly is keeping me up at night. And part of it is because I have a very geographically dispersed community.
Yes.
Of deep friends in many places and think I've invested 21 years of my life here. Am I here? But that keeps me up at night because I've just been with deep, long friends, people I've known since I was 10. And and we were all talking about it, and I do feel a little angsty about it,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I also do feel maybe for the first time in life that in my life that I'm not sure that life is getting better for people that are coming after us, and that keeps me up at night. That,
Yeah.
I grew up, everything was getting better. Like, we were doing better than our
Yeah.
parents.
Right.
That does worry me. What gets me up in the morning is I think it's a new day. It's a new day with full of opportunity, and who knows what's going to unfold today. And that excites me. That gets me out of bed in the morning.
That's great.
So,
What are 3 or 4 books that you have read in your lifetime that if you if you had to only kind of take those with you on a trip, what books would you take that have had kind of a shaping impact on you?
that's a terrible question.
Yeah, it's horrible, isn't it?
Um, well, I'll tell you what, I'm loving this book at the
And nothing
moment.
French, by the way.
No, don't worry. My French is not good enough. Um, because I won't even try to right now. Um, I'm loving this book at the moment, 21 Dialogues with Architects. Do you have it?
I bought it and I'm reading it and it's awesome.
Yeah, I'm loving yeah,
Like
so
it's
that
like it's crazy good. I'm sorry.
it's
Talk about it.
crazy good. No, it's crazy good. And it's about these dialogues with the architects about the future of museums. And honestly, you can replace the word architect with priest and museum with church.
I am, and it's amazing.
Amazing. That is one book. Um, and it's a recent one. The other book that's coming to mind, and it's kind of shocking, is Mudhouse Sabbath,
No.
which was a Lauren Winter book. And
Ah,
I grew up like you read Richard Foster's Celebration of Disciplines, and
yeah.
it's like meat and potatoes, and like I should be reading this. But
Yeah.
Lauren Winter's, it's like cupcakes and tea, and and then you've eaten and you realized how lovely it's been, and it's like these spiritual disciplines. And she says these are disciplines that are both Jewish and Christian, but quite frankly, Jews do them better.
Yeah.
And I think that really helped me think about like it kind of broadened my theological imagination.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been a very important book for me. The other book that's coming to mind is a book I read when I was young, like junior high, and it was a book called Black Like Me.
I remember that book.
And it was about a white guy who like pigmented his skin to become black and then drove across America in that experience. And there's something about that book that really transformed my life and made me think about the stories we inhabit, the stories we tell, what we'll never fully understand because of our location
Yeah.
and what it means to put yourself in someone else's shoes. So
That's right.
it's a very, very different books there.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I want to ask you a question about the church and the future of the church, but I don't necessarily know how to form it. Like, what is the hope of it? I know if it wakes up and all those things which are important, but like practically, if you were the empress for a day, and you got to make some fundamental like shifts of the way that we're approaching modernity and post-modernity and the 21st century, what would you encourage, insist, hope that the church would take notice of and do, and why?
Yeah. The scripture that says they will know you by your love for one another. I think the answer to the last bit of your question is that I wish that the church would get radical about really loving one another, like in a way that not just because you look the same, like kind of a cross difference. Like we would really get serious about what radical love and showing up for one another means in hard times that looks radically different to culture. So I wish that would happen, and I think that that would be transformative. But I really think that the church right now, to be honest, and a lot of work that I do in my role with Rooted Good is, we're working with church around church assets.
Yes.
What does it mean to steward our assets? Like the church is in every neighborhood in America, and sitting on the greatest opportunity that we've had in more than 100 years to say, are we going to be the hope in our neighborhoods? And like to actually meet the needs of our neighbors, to look outside of ourselves, to care, and to be the ones that bring justice and renewal to every neighborhood, whether that's through helping to think differently about housing or health or, incubating businesses, whatever is needed in our neighborhoods. But it does take asking a different set of questions, which is, why are we here?
Yes.
And I think that that's what I really want the church to wake up and ask more, is why are we here? Why are we here in this place? To what are we called? And I don't think we're called to get dressed up on a Sunday morning and just sing songs, as much as that is meaningful and important. That can't be the reason we exist. It can't be the reason we have the insane amount of resources that exist.
That's right. That's beautiful.
I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. It does. It does. Both the work that you've started, both in Rooted Good, we're going to put all this stuff in the show notes so people have access and kind of can hunt some of those down. But there's deep resources that you've created out of not just your curiosity, your hunger, your desire to have the church being a place that flourishes, and not from the top down, but from, like, I think one of the things we don't take our context really seriously. We were taught in seminaries how to exegete the Greek, but not how to exegete our neighborhood, right? And so I think that actually it's more important to exegete the place you live rather than the text that you've inherited. And I think that that's probably part of what the church, and you've done a great job of providing the church tools and organization tools to exegete the place. So yeah.
Well, I think it starts, right? I think everything that I build is a process tool, because you can't be in every place. So how do you help people do the work in their place, right? That's why it's like, what questions do you need to ask in your place? How do you see what only you can see?
Yeah.
Right. And that's really every tool I've designed for the church has been that. How do you do the work in your neighborhood out of who you are? So
beautiful. I've been talking about you in circles I'm in this church, saying I'd really like us to engage with you for this next phase of some of the things we're doing as we think about design thinking and designing for other than just program, right? How do you, I think...
I'd really love it. I mean, interesting. Do you know, a friend said to me the other day, he said he'd been thinking, it was a good conversation, and he said, we teach people how to critique, but not how to construct.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought that's another way to think about, like, the design. Like, we don't teach people how to design and construct. We teach people.
I think that's right. The way we end this usually is we just say our names and then I sign off. So I'm going to let you say your name.
Shannon Hopkins.
I'm Jeff Wood.
And I'm Matt Russell, and this is Pod Have Mercy.